top brass of the Nazi Party take their places on the podium of the Reichstag. Among them, Air Chief Hermann Göring and party stalwart Rudolf Hess. Göring is riding high in Hitler's favor, following the military takeover of Austria and Czechoslovakia without a shot being fired. But Hess, despite having the grand title of Deputy Führer, is not a happy man. They've come to hear their leader address the German people, and they know their fortunes hang on his plans. Hitler says he desires nothing but peace, mocking Britain and America for demanding assurances that Germany will not invade its neighbors. He reads out a long list of countries which the Reich has no hostile intentions towards.
Liechtenstein, Luxemburg, Polen, Ungarn, Rumänien, Jugoslawien, Russland, Bulgarien, Türkei, Iran, Arabien, Syrien, Palästina,
But the Reich, he says, has legitimate interests and demands, including the return of German territory in Poland to the fatherland. Hitler claims Germany is the innocent victim of foreign aggression, especially from Poland. Not everyone is sold on Hitler's vision. The old war hero Göring fears his Führer is biting off more than he can chew. But it's Rudolf Hess who has the greatest sense of foreboding. Hess knows Hitler well enough to understand that although the Führer talks of peace, he's preparing for war. Back in the old days, Hess was Hitler's closest confidant.
Die Partei ist Hitler! Hitler aber ist Deutschland! Geht Deutschland! Hitler! Hitler! Sieg! Sieg!
His commitment to Hitler is fanatical. But after years of unwavering devotion, of all Hitler's courtiers, he feels the least able to influence unfolding events. And although the two men share much in common, Hess's obsessions are starting to grate on Hitler. If Hess is starting to feel paranoid, it's with good reason. Even his own staff are plotting against him. 6 years before, Martin Bormann, a backroom administrator in the Nazi Party, had impressed Hess with his quiet efficiency and had been appointed to his personal office. But since then, the ruthlessly ambitious Bormann has wheedled himself ever closer to Hitler and never misses an opportunity to undermine Hess. For a schemer like Bormann, his boss is an easy target because he's becoming obsessed with pseudosciences like astrology and horoscopes. No wonder his own staff are ridiculing the Deputy Führer behind his back. On one occasion, an aide comes into his office to see the second most senior man in the Nazi Party trying to exert the power of mind control over a chair. Hess's insecurity increases when he discovers Nazi leaders have been summoned to a crucial meeting in the Reich Chancellery to plan the invasion of Poland, and he's not been invited. But despite his flakiness, Hess is right to worry about all-out war in Europe, and he's not alone. As preparations for the invasion of Poland continue, Hermann Göring is also anxious. He knows that Hitler is eyeing up communist Russia, and Poland is just the stepping stone to the main prize. Hitler's gambling that Britain is bluffing, that it won't come to Poland. Poland's aid. Goering fears the Führer is misjudging London, but realizes there's no changing his leader's mind, so he makes a tactical retreat. Anxious to prove his worth, Hess tries to persuade Britain to stop supporting Poland. He invites a senior British politician, Lord Buxton, to Germany for talks. But even he can see that Hess no longer has the power to rein in the Führer.
Die ist am 30. Januar dieses Jahres ausgebrochen.
Joseph Goebbels, Hitler's trusted minister of propaganda, has no reservations about going to war and offers a pretext to invade Poland. His propaganda machine pumps out stories, some narrated in English for an international audience, that ethnic Germans living in Poland are being attacked.
Thousands of them flee for the persecutions of Polish gangs. Their homes are systematically burned down and devastated by the Poles.
But these stories are all fake news. Then the propaganda is ramped up to blame the Polish government for actually organizing the attacks on Germans within its territory.
Hundreds of thousands of worn-out, distressed and panic-stricken people pour daily into the German refugee camps.
The fake stories do the trick. German military hardware is moved close to the Polish border and primed for action. Goebbels has prepared the fire. All it needs now is the spark to ignite the flames of war. And it's not long before they get it. A German radio station near the border with Poland comes under attack. Some of the raiders are killed. They're found to be Polish soldiers. Later that night, Berlin radio broadcasts the news of this outrageous provocation. But all is not as it seems. The whole thing has been staged, the brainchild of SS boss Heinrich Himmler. The raiders were in fact SS troops in Polish uniforms and carrying Polish guns. And the bodies left at the scene, they weren't Poles either. Hitler now has his excuse to retaliate. War is just hours away, and Goering knows it. But to survive in the inner circle, you have to think fast, and the head of the Luftwaffe pulls himself together. Dawn on the 1st of September 1939, the point of no return to the deadliest conflict in human history. Goering's Luftwaffe launches the Second World War by bombing civilian targets in Poland. Then the warships of the Kriegsmarine join the attack. And the Wehrmacht storm across the border. Now the conflict has begun. With new enthusiasm, Hess signs the documents that incorporate Polish territory into the Third Reich. His fanatical devotion to Hitler trumps any personal doubts he may have had about going to war. 2 days after the invasion, the whole game plan changes when Britain declares war. Goering's prediction, which had been brushed aside by Hitler, has come true. Britain may now be in the war, but it can't stop Germany overrunning Poland within 5 weeks. Goering is the hero of the hour, another feather in his cap after the annexation of Austria and Czechoslovakia. Now Heinrich Himmler moves center stage. He unleashes the SS to crush any resistance. But they go further, seeking out and targeting Jews and other undesirables. It's another ominous step towards what will become known as the Holocaust. So far, Hitler's grand campaign for new lands in the East has gone perfectly to plan. But now the inner circle is about to face an existential threat, and it comes in the very heartland of the Third Reich. In the autumn of 1939, the inner circle gathers in Munich to commemorate the failed putsch of 1923. As usual, Hitler will make a speech at the Bürgerbräu Beer Hall where it all began. He intends to fly to Berlin later that evening. But as fog descends over the Bavarian capital, his plans have to change. A photographer is there as Hitler starts his speech ahead of schedule. The Führer leaves the hall as soon as he's finished. Precisely 13 minutes later, the bomb had been planted right behind where Hitler would have been. 8 people are killed and many more injured. Each henchman, in his own way, tries to make capital out of the failed assassination and use it to curry favor with the Führer. Hess stages an elaborate ceremony to honor the blood martyrs, and of course to laud praise on the Führer's miraculous escape. Goebbels is also quick to turn the attack to his advantage. But as always with Goebbels, it's a lie. The bomb wasn't the work of enemy agents. It had been planted by a German, acting alone. Georg Elser had wanted to stop the war, fearing it would lead to untold human suffering. He is caught trying to flee across the Swiss border and confesses. For Heinrich Himmler, the man in charge of Hitler's personal security, the assassination attempt is very bad news. And according to the local Gestapo chief, Himmler doesn't hesitate to take out his frustration on the prisoner. Spring 1940. Goering's Luftwaffe leads the way as Hitler unleashes the next phase of his master plan to conquer Europe. First, German troops occupy Denmark and Norway. Then a huge invasion force pushes its way through Luxembourg, the Netherlands, Belgium, and then defeats France within 6 weeks. British forces in northern France are overwhelmed by the speed of the German blitzkrieg. They're pushed back to the coast and evacuated from the beaches of Dunkirk. Goering is confident he can finish Britain off when the time comes. The conquest of France as the high watermark for the military success of the Third Reich. Hitler is triumphant. This victory has been his life's ambition and sweet revenge for humiliating defeat in the First World War. Goering basks in his Führer's success. Newly promoted to Reichsmarschall, the most senior rank in the military, Goering heads to Paris, to the Louvre, and rewards himself with the spoils of war. The full scale of Goering's plundering will only be revealed at the end of the war when his treasures are discovered by the Allies, hidden in Germany. Inner Circle favorites Bormann and Goebbels are also in Paris, riding high on the Führer's coattails. Goebbels arranges the ultimate propaganda photo opportunity of the conquering hero. But there's one leader left out of the party in Paris. The Deputy Führer, one of those now constantly at Hitler's side, is Albert Speer, formerly a junior on Hess's staff, but now chief architect of the Reich. He is steadily assuming the role of Hitler's confidant, and his writings record Hess's fall from grace.
Hitler said to me after a conversation with Hess lasting many hours, "With Hess, every conversation becomes an unbearably tormenting strain. He always comes to me with unpleasant matters and won't leave off."
Shut out of the inner circle, the pressure is getting to Hess, and the others can see it. Goering gossips about how the Deputy Führer uses psychic powers to divine if letters bring good or bad news. While Hitler no longer takes him seriously, saying, "I only hope he never has to take over from me. I wouldn't know who to be more sorry for, Hess or the party." Barely 3 weeks after the surrender of France, Goering's Luftwaffe launches an onslaught on Britain, the prelude to invasion. The Battle of Britain is underway, but it will see a turn in the fortunes of war.
The battle is fought above the clouds, but this is how it ends. Another. And another. 169 in one day.
Against the odds, the Royal Air Force holds out. And the Blitz, the intensive bombing of cities and industry across the country, fails to weaken British resolve. For the first time, the Nazi war machine doesn't look quite so invincible. Goering's failure to crush Britain from the air forces the planned invasion to be put on hold. The reputation of the Luftwaffe commander is now looking rather tarnished. His star may be waning, but Hess, meanwhile, finds new resolve. He begins to formulate a secret plan, an opportunity to redeem himself, with the help of a skill he learned many years before. Hess is an experienced pilot. He flew biplanes in the First World War. Now, he familiarizes himself with the prototype of the latest Messerschmitt, taking it on flights under the guise of testing its capability. The 110 is usually crewed by 2 pilots, but Hess has it modified so he can fly solo. And he has extra fuel tanks fitted to increase its range. Hess knows that Hitler is preparing to invade Russia, and he recognizes that Germany cannot fight a long war on two fronts. His outlandish plan is to go behind the Führer's back, fly to Britain, and try to meet an influential contact who, he hopes, will introduce him to Winston Churchill. The aim? To persuade the British to sue for peace. The person Hess hopes will act as a go-between is someone he met 5 years earlier when the Olympic Games were held in Germany. Behind the scenes, the Nazi leaders laid on lavish parties for foreign dignitaries, and it's then that Hess is thought to have been introduced to a well-known Scottish aristocrat. Like Hess, the Duke of Hamilton was a keen pilot. In fact, it was something of a hero in the aviation world, after being the first person to fly a biplane over Mount Everest. To Hess, this dashing adventurer with a fancy title must have come across as being at the heart of the British establishment. Someone very well connected, who probably mixed with royalty, and perhaps even had a direct line to the British leadership. Now, 5 years on, Hess plans to renew that acquaintance. He'll fly to the Duke of Hamilton's estate in Scotland and ask him for an introduction to Churchill. At the beginning of May, Hess visits the Führer in the Reich Chancellery. It is to be their last meeting. Hess never said what they talked about that day, a fact that would give rise to a conspiracy theory that maybe Hitler was in on the plan. But does it stand up to scrutiny? 6 days after that meeting, the most bizarre episode of the Second World War starts to unfold. Rudolf Hess explains his intentions in a letter to Hitler. He then leaves home, telling his wife Ilse he will return in a couple of days. Hess drives to the aerodrome. He tells his adjutant to deliver his letter to Hitler by hand the following day. There's no turning back now. Hess's route takes him across Germany and over the North Sea towards Scotland. He navigates right into enemy airspace and reaches his planned destination south of Glasgow. But in the fading light, he cannot see anywhere to land. He decides he has no alternative. He'll bail out. But despite all the dangers, Hess lands safely. On hearing the plane crash, a farm worker goes out to investigate and comes face to face with the Deputy Führer. "I am a German," the well-spoken intruder announces, "and I have an important message for the Duke of Hamilton." Then the local Home Guard arrives on the scene. But the warm welcome will be short-lived. The prisoner is positively identified as the enemy's deputy leader. This is not the reception he had in mind. That same weekend, Adolf Hitler is taking a relaxing break at his Bavarian retreat, the Berghof. On the Sunday morning, around the same time as Hess is identified in Scotland, his adjutant arrives with a most important letter for the Führer.
My Führer, when you receive this letter, I shall be in England. You can imagine that the decision to take this step was not easy for me. And if, my Führer, this project, which I admit has but very little chance of success, ends in failure and the fates decide against me, this can have no detrimental results for you or Germany. It will always be possible for you to deny all responsibility. Simply say, I am crazy.
The principals are summoned. Bormann has no answers to Hitler's furious questions. How could Hess have flown off without anyone knowing? Why didn't anyone stop him? He's in a very delicate position, being still nominally Hess's deputy. Will he be tainted by association to the traitor? The control freak has lost control. So what happens now? In his diary, Goebbels sums up the mood inside the inner circle.
The entire affair is thoroughly confused at the moment. A hard, almost unbearable blow. The Führer is quite shattered. What a sight in the world's eyes. The Führer's deputy, a mentally disturbed man. Dreadful and unthinkable. Now we shall have to grit our teeth.
Goebbels does precisely as Hess suggested. His radio stations report that Hess is mad.
The letter he left unfortunately shows in his confusion the evidence of a mental derangement, which leads us to fear that party member Hess has fallen victim to a delusion.
The broadcast goes on to suggest that the Deputy Führer has most probably crashed or met with an accident. And that, as far as the stunned entourage around Hitler is concerned, is the end of the matter. Hess becomes a non-person. He is never to be mentioned in public again. But it leaves an uncomfortable question in the mind of many Germans, but a question which no one dares voice. If Hess was deranged, how come he was still in place as the Führer's deputy? Precisely 4 hours after the German radio bulletin, the BBC broadcasts this astonishing announcement.
Here is the news from London. Rudolf Hess, Hitler's deputy, has flown from Germany and landed in Scotland by parachute.
The newsreels gloat over this bizarre turn of events. Hess's unexpected arrival in Scotland is a moment of light relief during the dark days of the Blitz.
His name is David McClave. He works on a farm not far from Glasgow. He saw Rudolf Hess coming down in the darkness by parachute.
I went over to the farm and the only weapon I could find was a pitchfork. The man refused tea and would only have a drink of water.
Rudolf Hess may have thought he would be invited to have tea with Churchill, but instead, he's taken off to the Tower of London. The wisest course of action, Hess tells his interrogators, would be for Britain to seize this chance to make peace with Hitler and form an alliance against Soviet Russia. And if king and country would just allow Nazi Germany a free rein in continental Europe, Britain and its empire will be left untouched. The interrogators can't work out if Hess is deluded or plain mad. And his arrival in Britain had coincided with one of the worst air raids of the Blitz, in which 1,200 people had been killed. Winston Churchill is in no mood to talk peace. Back at the Berghof, Bormann's keen to fill the new vacancy, and so immediately moves to distance himself from his former boss. He has Hess's wife, Ilse, interrogated and threatened with eviction from the family home. But she appeals to Eva Braun, and Hitler accepts she was not in on the plan. In happier days, Bormann had named two of his children, Rudolf and Ilse, after their godparents. Now he promptly changes their names by court order. Within days having ridden the storm, Bormann's loyalty is rewarded. Hitler abolishes the post of Deputy Führer, and despite strong objections from both Goering and Goebbels, appoints Bormann as head of the Chancellery, his closest aide and formal gatekeeper. With fox-like cunning, the backroom operator has finally reached the pinnacle of his power, at the heart of the injustice, violence, and terror of the Third Reich. Back in Britain, Hess is moved to a safe house outside London. Hess is in the depths of despair. To him, there's only one way out. But Hess fails again. Rudolf Hess will remain behind bars for the rest of his life. He pours his heart out in Red Cross letters to his family and friends.
Dear all, you can imagine how I am thinking of you. My thoughts are no less with the Führer and with the whole nation. Someday I shall return home. I am looking forward to it with pleasure. True, I achieved nothing. I was not able to stop the madness of the war and could not prevent what I saw coming. But it makes me happy to think that I tried.
With one man down, Hitler's henchmen reassess their positions. Goering is looking vulnerable, while Goebbels and Himmler are holding their own. And Bormann is stealing a march on all his rivals. But as the war progresses, the infighting among Hitler's inner circle will become even more intense.